Something came through tonight. Not to the keeper who received it, through her.
It was never hers to keep. It was addressed to you.
Thoth showed her the vision, and this isn't the first time it tried to reach you. A conversation that stopped short, a dream that dissolved before the message, a silence that almost spoke.
And every time, a quiet doubt. Maybe you're not the right receiver for your own revelation.
It wasn't rejection. It was never lost. It was held, waiting for a version of you that could receive it whole. Today, it didn't close.
A flash of gold at the edge of closed eyes.
A presence watching from an angle that has no name, a tightening low in the throat, the exact point where truth gets caught before it's spoken. This is among the most forbidden visions Thoth has ever revealed, not dangerous to know, but too much for almost anyone to receive whole.
It didn't fail, all those other times.
It was waiting for this one. And this one is yours. Something came through tonight, not to the keeper who received it, through her. That's the part most people get wrong when they hear a story like this one. They think the message stops with the person who received it first. It doesn't. What passed through was never hers to keep. It was addressed to you, and she was only the door it walked through to get here. Thoth is the one who showed it to her, and this isn't the first time this exact vision has tried to reach you, not necessarily in this form, through a conversation you almost had, a dream you woke up right before the end of, a silence that felt for 1 second like it was about to say something, and every single time something closed before it finished. Tonight it didn't close. For the first time, it went all the way through. The reason it finally arrived has almost nothing to do with anything you did differently tonight. It has to do with what was waiting on the other side of it. You, in the exact state you're in right now, listening to this. You know the feeling being described here even before it's explained, because you've lived it more than once. A conversation that was moving towards something, and then it just stopped, and the person changed the subject, or you did, and neither of you ever went back to it. A dream that had the shape of an answer, vivid enough that you woke up already trying to hold on to it, and by the time you were fully awake, the center of it, the actual message, was gone, and all you were left with was the feeling that something important had almost reached you. A moment of silence, in a car, in a waiting room, right before sleep, where for half a second the air seemed to thicken, like it was gathering itself to say something, and then it passed, and the moment was just a moment again, and you told yourself you imagined it. Here's the part that's harder to say out loud. It wasn't just the interruption that hurt, it was the doubt that came after it. The quiet suspicion that maybe that answer, the one that kept almost arriving, was never actually meant for you. That maybe you're the kind of person things get close to but never quite reach. That maybe you're not the right receiver for your own revelation. You've probably never said that thought in those exact words, not even to yourself. It's the kind of fear that doesn't announce itself directly. It just sits underneath every near miss, every almost, every time you felt something building and then watched it dissolve before it finished forming. And it accumulates. Every unfinished moment adds a little more weight to the same quiet question. Is it me? Am I the one it can't get through to? Maybe it wasn't even a conversation or a dream. Maybe it was smaller than that, a name that surfaced in your mind for no reason right before you fell asleep and was gone by morning. A stranger's glance held a half second too long, like they recognized something in you they couldn't name either. A sentence that formed itself in your head, fully finished, and then slipped away before you could write it down or say it out loud. None of these felt significant enough on their own to mention to anyone, but you remember them. That's the tell. You don't remember things that meant nothing. If you felt that, and something in you already knows you have, or you wouldn't still be listening, hear this clearly before we go any further. That question has an answer, and it isn't the one you've been afraid of. So why now? Why did it take until tonight, after every dream that dissolved and every conversation that stopped a sentence short of finishing? And was it ever really you it kept failing to reach? Or was something happening in the space between you and whatever this is, something that had nothing to do with your worth at all? Here is what was actually happening. Every one of those times, the answer didn't make it all the way through. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't the universe or Thoth or whatever you want to call the source of these things, deciding you weren't ready, weren't worthy, weren't the one. Readiness doesn't work like a test you pass or fail once. It works more like a passage that has to be built from both ends at the same time. Something has to be open on the side of what's arriving, and something has to be open on the side of the person receiving it. If either side isn't ready, the passage doesn't fail, it just doesn't complete. Not yet. There's no way to know for certain whether it was something on the other side that kept closing too early, or something in you that was still forming, still gathering the shape it needed before it could hold what was coming. Honestly, it was probably both. These things rarely have one cause, but here's what matters more than the cause. An incomplete passage is not a discarded one. What almost arrived and then closed wasn't lost, it was held. Every time it closed, it didn't disappear. It waited, still intact, still whole, for a moment when it could come through without breaking apart on the way. That's the part that changes everything about how you should understand your own history with this. Every near miss you've ever had, every conversation that stopped short, every dream that dissolved before the message, every silence that almost spoke, wasn't evidence against you. It was the same vision, held carefully, refusing to arrive in pieces you'd forget by morning. It was choosing to wait for a version of you that could receive it whole, rather than break itself into fragments just to arrive on time. Today, it didn't close. That's the only thing that's actually different. Not you, not some sudden achievement, not a test you finally passed. Just today, it didn't close. And that's enough to know that whatever was still forming on your side has finished forming. The passage is open. What's about to come through is not a beginning. It's an arrival that's been in motion for longer than you knew. Here's what actually happens in the moment a passage like this opens, because vision is a word that can mean almost nothing without being specific. This isn't a single fixed image handed to you to see one particular way. It shows up differently for everyone, because a single picture that wasn't yours would feel like nothing had happened at all. So here's what tends to arrive. In one form or another, in the instant the block finally gives way. Sometimes it's a flash of gold at the very edge of your closed eyes, not centered, not something you're looking at directly, just present at the periphery, like light catching something just out of frame. Sometimes it's the sensation of being watched from an angle that doesn't exist anywhere in physical space, not behind you, not beside you, from a direction your body has no name for. And if you felt that before, you already know it usually arrives paired with a strange certainty that whatever is watching is paying attention back. Sometimes it's a sound that isn't quite a sound, more like a voice speaking from inside a wall, muffled by something solid between you and it. Sometimes it's the faint taste of metal at the back of the tongue, there and gone before you can name it. And sometimes it's simpler than any of that. A single second where the weight of your own body seems to disappear. None of these is more correct than the others. Whichever one shows up, or none of them, and something entirely your own instead, that's the passage, recognizing exactly what shape it needs to take to reach you specifically. This is the same passage that's been trying to reach you every other time it almost did. Not a new vision, not a different attempt. The same one held and returned to, each time gathering a little more readiness before trying again. and every one of those earlier attempts left a trace in the same place, a tightness low in the throat, right at the base of the neck that most people mistake for nerves or tiredness or nothing at all. It isn't nothing. It's the exact point where the passage has always met its resistance, the place where something true tries to become spoken or seen or known and instead gets caught, swallowed back down before it finishes. In the language this kind of thing has always been described in, that point at the base of the throat is the throat chakra, the body's passage center, the place responsible for carrying what's forming inside into something that can finally exist outside, spoken or seen or simply known without needing proof. When it tightens, nothing gets through whole. When it loosens, whatever was waiting finally has a way out. And to be clear about something, because it's easy to misunderstand, none of this is about sound, not a tone, not a frequency you'd measure with an instrument, not something your ears are built to catch. What moves through that point isn't vibration in the air, it's vibration in dimension, a shift in what layer of yourself is active and listening. The field around that part of you isn't waiting to hear anything, it's waiting to open. Maybe you're already asking yourself whether you'd even recognize it if it happened, whether you're the kind of person who'd feel something like this, or whether it would just pass you by the way everything else seems to. That doubt is not a disqualifier. It's actually part of how you know the passage was real in every one of its earlier failed attempts, because a person who never had anything try to reach them wouldn't carry that particular tightness at the base of the throat, wouldn't have that specific, nameless sense that something keeps almost happening. You don't invent a symptom for a phenomenon that was never present. The ache isn't nothing. It's the surest sign that this has been circling you for a long time. Think of it the way pressure builds before something finally gives, not violently, just steadily, the way water finds its way through stone, not by force, but by repetition, by returning to the same point again and again until one day, without any single dramatic moment, it's simply through. That's what's been happening every time this passage almost opened and then didn't, not failure, accumulation. Every attempt added something the next attempt could stand on, even the ones that felt, at the time, like nothing had happened at all. Every one of those unfinished moments was not the message giving up on you. It was the message being kept, protected, held intact somewhere you couldn't see, so that when it finally did arrive, it would arrive whole instead of in scattered pieces you'd forget by the next morning. Nothing about you was ever unworthy of receiving this. What was incomplete was the passage, not the person waiting on the other side of it. And a passage that takes its time to open is not a passage that was closed to you. It's one that refused to let you receive it broken. Being kept safe and being kept away from are not the same thing, even though they can feel identical from the inside while you're waiting. You only know the difference afterward, once whatever was being protected finally reaches you intact, and you realize how much would have been lost if it had arrived too soon, half-formed, in a version of you that wasn't ready to hold it. What felt like distance the whole time was closeness the entire time, just closeness that hadn't finished becoming visible yet. There is no doorway involved in any of this, no place you'd have to travel to, and no particular hour that matters more than another. The portal, if that word is even useful here, isn't a location or a time of day, it's an instant. The exact second the block finally gives way is the entire threshold. Before that second, the passage is still forming. After it, it's already crossed. There's no in-between to walk through, no waiting room on the other side. It happens the way a knot releases, not gradually loosening thread by thread while you watch, but held, and then, without warning, simply undone. That instant is close now, not because of anything you need to perform or prove, because the same passage that's been circling you through every unfinished conversation, every dream that dissolved too early, every silence that almost spoke, has finally reached the density it needed to complete itself. You didn't call it here tonight. It's been on its way for longer than tonight. What's different now is only that it's arriving instead of retreating. Notice, if you're willing, what's happening in your body right now, even before we get to anything you need to do on purpose. A subtle contraction, low in the throat or high in the chest, followed almost immediately by something loosening just behind it. Not comfort exactly, more like the specific relief of a held breath finally allowed to leave. That contraction, then release, is not incidental. It's the field marking its own progress, tightening one last time, the way a muscle sometimes tightens right before it lets go completely, not to resist the release, but to gather itself enough to make it clean. Some people feel this as warmth spreading from the collarbone upward. Others feel almost nothing distinct, just a strange, sudden lightness in the space where the tension used to be, noticed mostly by its absence. Both are the same event. The field doesn't announce itself the same way twice, even within the same body, and it was never going to arrive the identical way it's arrived for anyone else. What was guarded so carefully for so long doesn't need to be dramatic to finally arrive. It only needs to be received. None of what's coming next requires effort from you. That's worth saying plainly, because most of what you've been taught about receiving anything, an answer, a message, a change, comes wrapped in the idea that you have to work for it, chase it, hold your body a certain way, believe hard enough. This isn't that. Effort closes the throat further. It doesn't open it. Everything from here only asks you to stop bracing against what's already arriving and let it move through the one place in you that's been waiting for longer than you've been aware of waiting, to finally let something all the way through. Right now, wherever you're sitting, bring one hand gently, no pressure, to the base of your throat, right where it meets your collarbone. Just rest it there. You're not doing anything to that spot. You're only paying attention to it the way you'd notice a room by walking into it rather than by describing it from outside. Notice, without judging whatever you find, whether there's any tension there right now, a tightness, a held quality, like something is being kept from moving. Maybe an urge to swallow that doesn't quite resolve when you do. Whatever's there, don't try to change it yet. Just let yourself feel it clearly enough to know it's real. While the passage completes, the vision finally moving all the way through instead of stopping halfway, the way it's tried to so many times before, let your jaw soften. Not force it open, not drop it dramatically, just unclench, the way your hand unclenches when you finally notice you've been making a fist. Let it happen at its own pace, however slow that is. There's nowhere it needs to arrive by. You don't need to picture a color. You don't need to imagine a light or a shape or a symbol. That's not what's being asked of you here. And reaching for an image might actually get in the way, because the body doesn't need a picture to let something go. It only needs permission. All that's being asked is that you notice the sensation of loosening in your own rhythm without deciding in advance what it should feel like or how fast it should arrive. If your breath wants to change on its own, a little deeper, a little slower, a small exhale that goes on longer than you expected, let it without steering it there on purpose. You're not performing a breathing technique. You're only not interrupting what the body already knows how to do once the throat stops holding it back. If something comes on its own, a light tingling, a warmth spreading upward from the collarbone, a sudden unexpected relief somewhere in the chest, that is the confirmation, not proof that you did it correctly. Just the sign that the passage, which has been trying to reach exactly this point in your body for longer than you've known, has finally arrived there. And if nothing comes yet, if the throat stays quiet and nothing seems to shift, that's not a failure either. This passage has never obeyed pressure, and it isn't going to start now, not even the small pressure of wanting to feel something because you were told to expect it. Some things complete the moment they're spoken, others take a little longer to settle in a body that spent a long time holding on out of habit. Either way, nothing here is being withheld from you. It's only finishing on its own schedule now, the same way it's been finishing in its own way this entire time. Let your hand stay there for a moment longer and hold this instead of anything visual. What was tightening in that spot was never you being rejected. It was the passage guarding itself until you were ready to receive it whole. That's the only thing that changed today. Not you, just today it didn't close. Understand what just happened here, because it's easy to let a moment like this pass by without registering its actual size. This wasn't one attempt among many that finally worked out. Every other time this passage tried to reach you and close before finishing, that wasn't this same vision failing repeatedly and getting lucky on some final try. It was this vision refusing every version of itself that would have arrived incomplete. It would not come to you broken into pieces you'd half remember and eventually stop trusting. It waited every time for the one attempt that could deliver it whole, and this is that attempt. Not the latest in a series, the only one that was ever going to count. Count them if you want to. Every near miss, every half-formed dream, every silence that thickened and then let go without saying anything. Each one used to look like proof that nothing was really happening. Look at them again now, together, from here. They were never separate failures. They were the same attempt, made over and over, each one adding what the last one couldn't finish, until there was finally enough behind it to cross all the way through in one motion instead of stalling halfway again. What looked like a pattern of almost is, from this side of it, a record of exactly how long something this size takes to arrive intact. And here is the part that actually answers what brought you to this video in the first place. This isn't only the most demanding thing this passage has ever asked of you personally. Measured against everything Thoth has ever revealed, every vision that has ever tried to move from that place into a body willing to receive it, this is among the ones that required the most of the passage itself. Not more than your own history of almost moments. More than the passage's own limit for what it can carry through intact without breaking apart on the way. That's not a comparison to your past near misses. It's the ceiling of what a revelation like this is even capable of demanding, and it demanded that much, and it still arrived. Not because you forced it, because you were finally exactly still enough, exactly open enough, exactly ready enough for it not to have to hold back anymore. That is what forbidden actually means here. Not off limits, not dangerous to know. Simply this, too much for almost anyone to receive whole, and it just arrived whole in you. Not a fragment of it, not a version softened enough to be safe. All of it at once in the one place in your body that finally let it through. Most people who cross paths with something this size never get the whole of it. They get a fragment, a feeling they can't explain, a night they remember without knowing why it mattered, a sentence that came to them once and then never again. Not because they weren't worthy of more, because the passage in them never finished opening enough to let the rest through, and what did arrive had to be small enough to survive the gap. You've probably met someone like that, carrying a piece of something they never fully understood, turning it over for years the way you'd turn a stone smoothed by water, never quite whole. That is not what happened here. What happened here is the rarer thing, the one that doesn't usually make it all the way through intact, and it just did in you tonight. So sit with what's actually true right now underneath everything else this video said. It didn't fail to reach you all those other times. It waited. Every unfinished conversation, every dream that dissolved before the message, every silence that almost spoke and then didn't, none of that was rejection. It was the same passage, held carefully, refusing to arrive as anything less than whole until the exact moment you were ready to receive all of it at once. That moment wasn't a coincidence you happened to wander into. It was built slowly out of every version of you that came before this one, every time you almost heard it and didn't give up on listening anyway. What came through tonight didn't come for the keeper, it came through her, and it was always headed here, to you, to this exact point in your life where the throat that used to tighten around it has finally, quietly, let it through. It didn't close this time, not because you finally did something right, because you finally became someone it no longer needed to close against. What was forbidden to reach you has reached you. What was withheld is no longer withheld. It traveled through every version of you that wasn't ready yet, so that this version, the one listening right now, could receive it whole. It didn't fail all those other times. It was waiting for this one, and this one is yours. It always was.